So, I just saw Cruella earlier today. It is the fourth theatrical adaptation of 101 Dalmatians by Jodie Smith, and the third overall of the live action versions. And incidentally, it's coming out in the year that celebrates the 60th anniversary of the original animated film, but also the 25th anniversary of the one they did hit back in the day that I just looked at my Into Disney Plus hole. And even though, in my case, and you might as well vary depending on where you are, this was easier than working around the paywall. Oh, because someone's having a birthday this weekend, and this holiday weekend, incidentally. Only, again, I still believe that these two business can coexist, especially given how even when most recently released date and patent into Black Widow, which I'll get to in a little bit, it's the opening weekend projections quadrupled, and given how we're halfway there, here to full immunity, I definitely can agree with that. So after a prologue in the 60s with a young Estella being orphaned and also driven away by the Baroness, as played by Emma Thompson, and a incredibly cruel fashion magnate and countess, as as and now our proper origin story begins in the 1970s. Is with her being played by Emma Stone, and even though I was wondering about how this movie would handle her casting, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised that not only was performance way more invested than I thought it would be. I guess maybe there's just earlier takes they were using in the previews, but her journey to become Cruella is definitely, by all accounts, it shouldn't have worked, but it did somehow. I mean, it's not quite as dark as the standalone Joker, which incidentally they just greenlit the sequel, all with both Phoenix and Phillips' return. And before I went to go see this, or the DCU version of Harley Quinn for that matter, but definitely those similarities are definitely not without merit. I mean, and for maybe not quite as openly murderous as those characters, but it's definitely not a possibility she rules out. I mean, that's technically not a spoiler given how she definitely puts her own spin on the character. Since and how that similarly plays out is definitely most note. It's like, well, other characters that they've reversioned, be they Aladdin, Simba, or Mulan, are ultimately, despite their faults, shaped into the best versions of themselves by those around them. Cruella is ultimately corrupted by these same influences, and I definitely say that visually it's definitely a pretty film, and how it uses like the England and location, both the countryside, especially where the Baroness's his home is, and also like the appearance in 1970s London. And I definitely think the costume design and the production design are definitely big strong points that, especially in the many disguises, is that she makes not only for herself but also for her fellow partners in crime, Jasper and Horace. Yes, and also it's actually plays with a lot of the material from the previous incarnations of the story in ways I did not expect. I won't be spoiling them here, which will give you an idea of how much they surprised me, but I'll probably do the spoiler review and I'll decide, hey, once the paywall comes down in August. Yeah. It's definitely a component I really like with this film, given how there's a wide variety of tracks to help set the stage. Some very a, a strong remix of Led Zeppelin's Whole Lotta Love, as well as the Stooges' I Want to Be Your Dog. I mean, it's definitely a presentation, especially with the fashion designer that she partners with, Ernie. Again, I don't have a problem with this, it's how it fits the setting and the Cruella's endgame, so to speak. But it definitely it has like for the whole movie itself, which definitely is equal parts Andy Warhol pop art with early Tim Burton style gothic art. I mean, it's definitely the ideal blend of both camp and edge. Since I also definitely noticed some similarities to of all films and books Star Wars Prada, so which is a work that I've mentioned before. I have something a soft spot for, admittedly, and also will submit that even someone who has argued before they have successfully adapted the story in live action before, and they have done it again, no spoilers, but that's some of the cameos, especially in the denouement at the Baroness's estate, surprised me. I still submit. I also even go as far as to suggest that minus the superpowers, and he was trade hey dystopian in Japan for 1970s London, and this would definitely make a good live action adaptation of Kill la Kill, even given how in many ways Cruella and the Baroness as do end up becoming kind of like non-superpower versions of Hio and Ryoko. No spoilers, but you'll definitely find out why. So it's definitely he can definitely say this version has electric boots, some more hirsutes, and I read in a magazine. And Estella and the dots, if I can pardon the parlance. So it is definitely a weird, wild, held, and wonderful whole movie version. It may not be a favorite one, and even the runtime, which is about 137 minutes, it's not that different from the Star Wars and most of our universe movies I've already looked at. But oh man, I'm glad they came. So my final rating is 3.5 stars out of 4, and now it's time for another riff on incoming attractions. So I think I'll just keep this in release order, which is subject to change, so it's going to have a manageable amount of hype. Black Widow, as just mentioned, and now I can also offer my belated thoughts on the final trailer, where it still looks like it to be an impressive film, which is like to be the official start of Phase 4, which, as we all know, was going to be a last year before everything happened, and definitely my first thought, especially given how this final trailer is even further compounding this, that if they wanted to use characters that did not survive the Infinity Saga, they would have to make stories that involve them prequels or set the movie in a different timeline, and they have kind of done both here. Which also sees not only it's set chronologically after the events of Civil War, but before the events of the Infinity War, which sees Natasha Romanoff, played again by Scarlett Johansson, and returning into her old home in Russia to finish what she started, and also comes across some of her fellow comrades as with another Black Widow played Rachel Weisz, who I also have no problem taking over the role depending on how this movie goes, and I've liked her acting a long time, and as well as a father figure in The Red Guardian, played by David Harbour. So between this and the upcoming final season of Stranger Things, and I think he's got kind of like a whole market of like a big guy in Russia cornered, and I also definitely still gives me major credit for having like a villain as overlooked and awesome as Taskmaster in the mix. While their rogues gallery doesn't always get the best members, especially in this franchise. I think this one's definitely going to be worth watching, and again, it nearly quadrupled the opening weekend projections from when they, and even with the simultaneous Disney Plus us release, is in their premiere access tier here. It jumped from 45 million on opening to 170 million opening, which it'll definitely be interesting how that plays out, especially with have, have Amazon's recent purchase NGM. But once again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Jungle Cruise, July 30th, which is another movie that was going to be last year. Again, before everything happened, I mean, which is going to be the latest live action adaptation, one of their theme park rides, and Pirates of the Caribbean, I submit, was definitely lightning in a bottle. Not that this hasn't stopped them from trying to recreate it. Like the Haunted Mansion was and didn't really pan out. We'll see. Hopefully the Muppet version story fares better later this year. But the stars both Dwayne The Rock Johnson as well as Emily Blunt, and who, rather than the ride, which is typically a more leisurely one compared to the Pirates of the Caribbean, Haunted Mansion, or Star Tours, hers is going to be a sort of a throwback to the action adventure films of the pulp era as they basically try to find the fountain of youth. As at least that's my understanding. And not only just a rebrand and of the ride, which I don't have a problem with, as some other people do, separate from this movie, he I will put this in the maybe pile, mainly because I haven't been a big fan of the director's other films, so especially was not a big fan of the statements he was making about Aki before he got fired from the project of the live action remake. Hey, I guess I definitely can submit of his time next one, but with Taika and Ultimo statements maybe being Vinny Veiled swipes at him. Not ruling out the possibility that it might not work, but I'm very much open to the idea of yet another Dwayne The Rock Johnson an action film, which much like his has had his wrestling career, he definitely has a natural charisma that makes even his bad films memorable. Heck, I still think I found him a more interesting villain on and as Scorpion King than any other Mummy villains, probably because on spinoff, and they're working on doing like another follow up to that, which is going to be a direct sequel to the original that ignores the TTV films made without him. So yeah. Speaking of films that are meant to come out last year, here again, and we have Free Guy, which stars Ryan Reynolds as a non-player character in an online video game. I say this not to be insulting, but to be accurate. Where he realizes he's in a video game and subsequently falls in love with one of the player characters, which ends up shaking the stability of their world. And this one has another better release date. So it's actually going to be out last Christmas before everything happened. That's the earliest release date I have memorized even. And so I've also heard possibility of this actually just coming on Hulu as well, which would not surprise me either. They had another similar film with Frank Grillo, which also, even him as like an NPC has like some gaming vibes. She's a Groundhog Day even, with him constantly dying and respawning like nothing. And again, much like Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Reynolds at this point in his career, has, even in films that aren't very good, has like this kind of charming energy to him that actually makes him enjoyable, even if the movie itself, like. But then again, I definitely am interested, especially if Taika Waititi is going to be having a supporting role as another game designer, and also definitely shows you how long ago this was made, given how it has like a posthumous appearance from Alex Trebek. What feelings does this cameo arise in me? I'll take Wistful for 400, Alex. Miss you. Last, but definitely not least, Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings, which will be in release order after Black Widow on September the 3rd, and this one has actually was moved up a bit, and I will deal with anything else that comes, but I'm very much open to who had a martial arts centric like fantasy, urban fantasy with a predominantly Asian American main cast. Probably it's not going to be as hard R as like Mortal Kombat Demon Slayer movies were, but there definitely is a market for that I would say. And again, I definitely totally called it when I was talking about Iron Man 3 a while back, that's suggesting that this continuity's Mandarin is many people rather than one individual as a title, much like how Dark Church handled Ra's al Ghul. And if they're referring to the McLuhan rings, I think these could be like our next Infinity Stones, and they already set these up as far back as the first Iron Man, where the terrorist group ends up capturing Tony in Gomera, forcing him to build the missile before he builds the Mark I suit, which was affiliated with the Ten Rings, and one of them was even in Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine, being the guitarist who also provided some of the music alongside Wyman Jawadi. So I definitely on Labor Day weekend is definitely an unofficial end to summer, like people getting ready to go back to school and work. Even if I'm just going to be taking class online spring term, I definitely think it would be a nice way to ease back into stuff. And I'm definitely going to be deliberately lowballing it. I could at least see like Ant-Man or Doctor Strange level box office. But we will find out. It's definitely the right time for a movie like this, and same deal as I said before between this and the Eternals potential release. I'll just deal with that as it comes. Heck, my favorite film didn't get released in some countries, that being The Dark Knight, but it still found audience regardless. Anyway, that's all I have to say for now. I'll be giving you my belated next Bad Batch vlog tomorrow, as well as like a special Pokemon Day clause this month. And I will see you all soon. Take care.